Is leave granted? Thank you.
Thank you. I commend the bill to the House.
Thank you. Further speakers. The Honourable Damien Tudehope.
Thank you, Madam Acting President. It is now 11:10 at night. This is a very significant piece of legislation, and we are starting a debate about this piece of legislation at 11:10 at night. There are people who will want to speak on this piece of legislation who may well have gone home, may be too tired to do so, may want to move amendments, but because of the hour of the night, not do so. That, in my respectful submission to the Leader of the Government, is an abuse of democracy. This should not be starting, this bill should not be starting at this hour of night. It is, in many respects, something that I think grieves me, that people who should be given an opportunity to talk, to speak, are not given that opportunity in circumstances where they are fresh, where they've had an opportunity of preparing properly for the speech which they would want to give. And in many respects, it is also an abuse of all the people who may want to watch this debate, to participate in it. I've had more emails about this particular bill than any other bill that has come before this place. And I anticipate that there would be lots of people wanting to know what people have to say about this particular piece of legislation. And to be starting now in circumstances where there is no urgency which attaches to this bill, it is not due to start for 12 months. The bill is articulated to commence in 12 months' time. Why are we here doing this tonight? Why are we not doing this potentially tomorrow? Why are we not doing it potentially on the first sitting day that is available in May? And I'll tell you why. Because the government wants this piece of legislation out of the road. The government does not want continuing public exposure of this piece of legislation. They do not want people, I suppose, to have an input and put potential pressure on members of the government in relation to different views in relation to the provisions of this legislation. Now, I can only say that Mark Latham was right earlier today when he says that this is part of the manner in which the government does its business in relation to difficult issues. First of all, the government rejected an opportunity of having an inquiry. An inquiry which could have been done in circumstances where we could have done the inquiry over the break, first week back in May. The report could have been available and the debate could have continued. But no, this is a government which says that in relation to this sort of controversial legislation, get it out of the road. We will not brook amendments. We will not brook any further debate in relation to it. We are perfect. We are perfect. And we will not, in fact, even consider amendments, even if they are reasonable amendments. We won't consider them. We've got the perfect Attorney General over here. He's got perfect ways of thinking about legislation. No. That's I'm the first one to admit. This bloke has got to be some sort of megastar, because he is the only minister I have ever known who claims the title of the perfect attorney, who brings in legislation incapable of any amendment, and incapable of having amendments considered properly by the legislature of this place. Incapable. Even if they are really simple, even if they are in many respects reasonable, this bloke will not consider those amendments because it doesn't fit with his agenda. Now, I have to say that that is the height of arrogance. The height of arrogance. Mr. Perfect is, in fact, Mr. Arrogant. So turning to this bill, and it's probably, I've got to say something relevant. Madam Acting President, I happen to agree with what a lot of what the Leader of the Government said, because in fact I agree with her that New South Wales is a multicultural society with a wide range of perspectives on all sorts of matters, including the nature and purpose of human sexuality and the meaning of gender identity. Views on the two matters addressed in this bill, sexual orientation and gender identity, vary significantly. Many religious organisations and individual believers hold a firm view, often based on a traditional reading of religious texts, that the meaning of human sexuality is innately tied to human reproduction and the biological complementarity of men and women. Based on this view, some religious bodies teach and individual believers accept that sexual acts should only take place between two people of the opposite sex who are married to each other. And at the other end of the spectrum, there are views of sexuality are those who hold that any sexual acts between two or more people who are each above the age of legal consent are valid and indeed should be celebrated. Similarly, there is a wide range of views on the issue of gender identity. Several of the women's groups, including some feminist groups, are insistent, based on science they say, that sex is a biological reality and that the notion of an individual having a gender identity that differs from the individual's biological sex is fanciful and has no grounds in reality. In the view of these groups, pandering to these fanciful claims about an invisible gender identity poses real risks to hard-won women's rights, including the right to safe women-only spaces. Others believe not just that an individual's gender identity may differ from their biological sex as assigned at birth, but there are multiple possible gender identities, and that a person may change their self-declared gender identity as frequently as they feel inclined to do so, and that anyone who objects or even fails to affirm each of these self-declared gender identities is committing a breach of human rights that should be punished. How do we approach legislating for the whole community with such widely differing views? Mutual respect, an open acknowledgement of different views, and a genuine search for common ground are the appropriate approaches to the challenge of differing and often conflicting perspectives on what is truly good for the human person and for the community. Prior to the March 2023 election, the member for Epping, the then Premier, was the first leader to commit to legislating a ban on damaging gay conversion practices. He referred specifically to practices such as electroconvulsive therapy and food deprivation. The main offence provision in this bill, the bill before us tonight, appropriately includes an objective threshold of causing mental or physical harm to an individual that endangers the individual's life or is substantial. There is a broad common consensus that such practices are wrong and should not be permitted. Hopefully, there will never be a need for a prosecution for this offence, as the passage of this provision into law should cement the existing consensus that such practices are simply wrong. However, beside the creation of a specific offence, the bill would also introduce a very complex and potentially intrusive regime of civil complaints based on an unqualified provision that an entity contravenes this Act if the entity provides or delivers a conversion practice. The complex definition of conversion practice in Section 3 takes nearly a full page of the bill. It includes various exclusions. Understanding exactly what is and is not a conversion practice should be possible for all interested parties, including religious groups, feminist groups, families and health practitioners. Good law depends upon transparent law, people being able to understand it readily. If this understanding is not easy to attain, there may be significant consequences. People acting in good faith may find themselves accused of engaging in a banned conversion practice. Others, fearful of breaking the law they don't understand, may fail to provide needed, helpful treatment, care or advice to a person who requests it. Specific concerns about the bill, as it is before us tonight, have been raised, as I said before, by feminist groups, religious groups, health practitioners, and many individuals, including parents, with very genuine concerns about the potential intrusion into family life. The opposition will be supporting the bill at the second reading because it introduces an offence which will penalise practices about which there is broad consensus in the community, and they should be prohibited. And we promised this during the election campaign that we would ban it. However, we will be seeking to move a number of amendments during the committee stage to address at least some of these concerns that have been raised with us. We urge all members to consider each of these amendments on their merits and not just follow blindly the dictate of their party. If the government had held a genuine, open consultation with all stakeholders before introducing this bill, then these amendments may not have been necessary. Secret consultations only with a favoured few stakeholders is not how an open democracy should work. Excluding those with challenging opinions is unhelpful. Religious groups may learn to their regret that being invited to participate with the Minns Labor government in a secret dialogue is not the best way to achieve the best outcome for their members. The brash way in which the government has treated their participation as a de facto endorsement of the bill introduced should be a reminder that the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. Religious groups and individual believers remain concerned that encouragements to live chastely outside of marriage may fall under the ban of conversion practices, and that in some circumstances prayers and sermons may become unlawful. Health professionals, including those assisting children with gender identity issues, remain unclear as to what approaches to treatment they can provide without risking the wrath of the anti-discrimination president. Can genuine help with coping skills be offered to a person at their request, or only if there is certainty that the anti-discrimination president will not subsequently find that it was not directed to meeting the person's real needs? Will the anti-discrimination president be knocking on the door of a family home to pursue complaints against parents for going beyond a bland discussion and setting rules and behaviour standards for a child living under their roof? I will address these concerns more precisely during the committee stage of this bill when I move a number of amendments, most of which have been requested by the very faith leaders that were consulting with the government in relation to this bill. And I just want to say this to the various faith leaders who are now being embraced and given the warm endorsement of this bill, or giving the warm endorsement to this bill. In many respects, I understand that you wanted they wanted to achieve an outcome which they thought was the best outcome for the community which they represent. But there is a point, of course, where if you don't achieve what you think is in the best interests of your community, and in circumstances where they have written to numerous members of this place, requesting additional amendments to this legislation, there is a point where they need to be actually able to stand up and say that the bill is not one which they can continue to support. They are silent. in relation to their participation in relation to that. They are silent in saying to members whether they should support or not support the bill if the amendments which we will move tonight are not carried. And I have to say to those faith leaders, I think that is in fact moral cowardice, because if you request various amendments to be made and you think that they are so important in relation to this legislation, when you should have the courage to be able to say to those people who you're writing to whether you, in those circumstances, would continue to support the bill or whether you would not support the bill. Now, the failure to be able to do so, I think, represents for each and every one of them a real, in my respectful submission to each of them, a real betrayal of the communities which they represent. If you really believe it and you really want these amendments passed, then you should have had the courage to say so. I will reserve my further comments in relation to the bill to the committee stage and the amendments which I will be making. As I indicated earlier,